promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Ghana's President Mahama calls for collaboration among West African nations to strengthen regional stability.
Now more than ever before, we need to strengthen our ties with our neighbors to ensure that we're working together to keep our sub-region safe.
The Ivorian National Human Rights Council urges unity ahead of the October presidential election.
I would like to remind you that the election is a game, but a serious game. It is the noblest expression of popular sovereignty. It is through it that every citizen affirms his voice, influences the future of the nation in the construction of the common good.
The Malian army neutralizes several dozen terrorists in the northern region near Mauritania, and IOM announces the interception of more than 21,000 migrants at the Mediterranean Sea in 2024. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us, and welcome to our listeners in Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. This edition of Newslink begins with a call to West African nations to strengthen regional safety and stability through enhanced collaboration. Ghana's newly inaugurated President, John Dramani Mahama, made the call during his inaugural speech, emphasizing the importance of unity in addressing shared challenges within the sub-region. The swearing-in ceremony held at Independence Square, Accra, was graced by several African leaders, including Nigeria's Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Rwanda's Paul Kagame, Kenya's William Ruto, and Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traore, underscoring the event's significance on the continent. WADR's Accra correspondent Nadir Tete has more.
President John Dramani Mahama, in his inaugural speech, underscored the critical need for stronger partnerships across West Africa, emphasizing that the region's nations are united by shared history, culture, and common goals.
We stand in solidarity and work in alliance with all our neighbors in the sub-region. Recognizing the history of our borders, we also acknowledge that on the other side of our country's borders are our family members.
The president highlighted the pressing challenges facing the modern world, including economic shifts, climate change, and potential health crises. He called for collective efforts to strengthen the region's resilience in tackling these issues.
Now more than ever before, we need to strengthen our ties with our neighbors to ensure that we're working together to keep our sub-region safe.
President Mahama also stressed the importance of improving public health systems, drawing lessons from past pandemics, and advocating for a proactive approach to prevent future health emergencies.
Let us not forget the toll that the past epidemics of viruses like Ebola, COVID, and Mpox have taken on the families and communities and medical infrastructure in several of our neighboring countries and in the sub-region. Let us also not forget how swiftly and completely the COVID pandemic brought the entire world to a screeching halt. My government will be working diligently to strengthen our public health systems while monitoring the global health situation so that when and not if the next pandemic or epidemic occurs, the loss of lives in Ghana will be minimal.
The speech served as both a rallying cry for regional unity and a roadmap for Ghana's future, with promises of economic stabilization, inclusivity, and governance reforms. For WADR, Nadir Tete, Accra.
In neighboring Côte d'Ivoire, the National Council for Human Rights, NDH, is calling for unity in this year's election. The human rights institution is committed to an inclusive electoral process in a climate of peace and respect for human rights. The ceremony was attended by the Ivorian Minister of the Interior and Security, General Vagondo Diomande. Christopher Ticho has the rest of the details in this report by WADR's Albin Ade in Abidjan.
The National Human Rights Council, CNDH, remains determined to promote and protect the rights of all in this election year. For Namizata Zangari, president of the organization, human rights must be guaranteed at every stage of the electoral process.
I would like to remind you that the election is a game, but a serious game. It is the noblest expression of popular sovereignty. It is through it that every citizen, and even citizen, affirms his voice, influences the future of the nation, and participates in the construction of the common good. But beyond this civic act, the electoral year tests our collective ability to respect and protect the rights of all. As an impartial goal of democratic principles, the CNDH ensures that these rights are guaranteed at each stage of the electoral process.
General Vangodo Giomande is already proud of the CNDH commitment to building the rule of law. The Ivorian Minister of the Interior and Security took part in this ceremony.
Madam President, your institution plays a crucial role in the construction of our state of law by working relentlessly to promote peace, security, and solidarity throughout the country. Your commitment contributes to strengthening democracy and closing our institutions.
The National Human Rights Council, CNDH, is also committed to supporting the elections management body and the government in conducting a transparent and peaceful process. The Human Rights Institution also undertakes to monitor the smooth running of the elections with complete impartiality and to denounce abuses and human rights violations, but also to protect citizens and institutions against any form of pressure or discrimination.
A report filed in by WADR's Abidjan correspondent Albin Ade and voiced by Christopher Tichu. Let's now take you to the Sahel region, where several dozen terrorists have been neutralized by the Malian armed forces during a large-scale attack in the north of the country. The fight occurred on the night of Monday to Tuesday when hundreds of insurgents stormed villages in Eurodu Sahel region near the Mauritanian border. According to a statement from the General Staff of the Malian Armed Forces, FAMA, they attacked the communities with the help of accomplices and targeted critical infrastructures. Augustine Colley completes the story.
In a report on Tuesday, the General Staff of the Malian Armed Forces Provisional Report states that 30 terrorists were neutralized. It also disclosed that a significant quantity of weapons, including Kalashnikovs, machine guns, and a rocket launcher, were recovered. However, one soldier was killed during the fighting. This attack in the Nioro region comes a few days after the kidnapping of Kalib General Amadou Hadetal, whose death was announced by his captors. The Malian authorities have not yet confirmed this information, and it is unclear if the attack is linked to the Caliph's speculated death. It should be noted that the Nioro region in northern Mali is regularly targeted by terrorist attacks, and in recent years, jihadist groups have increased their operations in this border area with Mauritania. The success of the military operation on the night of Monday, January 6, is an important victory, said the Malian Armed Forces, which have been fighting terrorist groups for several years. However, the threat remains high and the authorities are calling for vigilance.
Augustine Colley reporting there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We are live on Facebook and WADR English service and on YouTube at WADR News. Now, crossing over to Nigeria, a notorious bandit leader, Dogo Gide, has imposed a 100 million naira equivalent to $65,000 levy on 23 communities in Zamfara State. The information has sent shockwaves across the northwest region, further exacerbating the fragile security situation. Sources confirm that residents of the affected villages in Zamfara are scrambling to meet the demands amid fears of violent reprisals. WADR's Usman Umar in Abuja reports.
According to sources, the communities were given specific amounts to pay, with some facing higher levies. Kuchin Kalgo was ordered to pay 20 million naira, while Sungawa and Rekiabu each faced demands of 15 million naira. Other heavily taxed villages include Kwarem Maisaje and Magazawa, both charged 10 million naira, and Gijinzama with 8.5 million naira. Smaller levies were imposed on other communities with amounts ranging from 2.5 million to 7 million naira. The targeted villages include Giwa, Oyam Magaji, Bari, Ungwar Rogo, and Machia, among others. Residents fear that failure to meet these demands could lead to violent attacks, Zamfara State Commissioner of Police Mohammed Dalijang confirmed the development, assuring residents that security forces are actively addressing the situation. Darlington Umoru, a security analyst, has been speaking on this development.
It's shocking at the level they have gone to now, and that they are asking a ransom from villagers in villages. 25 villages, put together in Zamfara State. It's no mean measure. But good enough, the Nigerian security agents and the military are up to the task. Attention, they are on the joint board now. Attention is focused on these areas to see how these persons in these villages can be protected.
The imposition of levies by armed groups has become a recurring challenge in Zamfara, a state grappling with widespread insecurity. Local communities have repeatedly faced extortion by bandits who demand payment to avoid attacks or abductions. Residents are calling for more decisive action from the government to combat the growing threat and restore peace to the region. Zamfara has been one of the states hardest hit by banditry in Nigeria's northwest, with the rural communities bearing the brunt of violence, kidnappings and extortion. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Away from Nigeria to Guinea, the death toll has risen in the wake of a demonstration called by the forces' views. According to the opposition, 3 young people were shot dead on Monday while others were injured. The organizers of the demonstration claimed that at least 100 protesters were arrested by the security forces. The Guinean forces' views on the third said it will continue to mobilize and lead demonstrations until the military leaves power and a civilian government is installed. However, across Conakry, army, police and gendarmerie tanks are still positioned at strategic locations. Abdullahi Umusu, a member of Forces Views, condemned the repression of protesters by state security despite the transitional government President General Mamadu Doumbouya's suspension of the ban on demonstrations on December 31, 2024. In the meantime, the government has yet to issue any official statement on the casualties recorded during Monday's violence. Let's now talk oil and gas. Here in Senegal, nearly 17 million barrels of crude oil have been recorded since the Sangoma oil field began production. Of this, around 3 million barrels have been commercialized. The announcement was made Tuesday by the Senegalese Ministry of Petroleum and Mines. Imoredet has more full report.
16.9 million barrels of crude oil is the production recorded since the start of operations at the Sangoma field in June 2024. Production has exceeded the initial target of 11.7 million barrels set by the Senegalese authorities and the Australian company Woodside. A positive result in such a short space of time, according to Lamine Jan. All that remains now, says the oil expert, is to address the economic challenges of production.
The exploitation is happening today in a very complex situation of economic constraints, of social constraints. Now perhaps we need an effective mobilization policy of resources that takes into account the production costs. Because it is good that we are told that we have indeed exceeded the objectives, that the wells are active, that the state's funds will be even more provided in terms of revenue, but it would be even better if the state of Senegal made the arrangements to audit production costs more.
Last December, almost 3 million barrels were produced, according to the Ministry of Petroleum, which adds that 2.94 million were sold on the international market. According to Lamine Jan, the revenues from these barrels will be used to purchase materials for oil storage. However, the oil expert insists that the revenues must be put to good use in order to achieve the country's development.
Today, it will be necessary to limit the state which is already working on the transformation of oil on the spot, but also trying to reinvest the revenues in other sectors, namely agriculture, fish farming, but also the employment of young people, the creation of jobs, and do our best to protect our ecosystem.
According to the Minister of Petroleum and Mines, all 12 wells in the Sangoma field are operational. This will ensure a total extraction of 100,000 barrels of crude oil per day.
Imoredet filed that report. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Ghana's President Mahama calls for collaboration among West African nations to strengthen regional stability. The Ivorian National Human Rights Council urges unity ahead of October presidential election. The Malian army neutralizes several dozen terrorists in the northern region near Mauritania. Ahead in the news, IOM announces the interception of more than 21,000 migrants at the Mediterranean Sea in 2024. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Thank you for staying with us. The Gambia is set to champion the acquisition of anti-doping testing equipment in West Africa. This comes as the country prepares to host the interregional ministerial meeting on anti-doping to mitigate drug abuse among young people. From Banjul, Sankule Janko reports.
The Gambia is hosting this year's interregional ministerial meeting on anti-doping beginning on the 21st January 2025. Although anti-doping aims to prevent the usage of banned substances among athletes, the ministerial meeting overall aims to mitigate the use of banned substances among young people in the sub-region. In an exclusive interview with WDR, the Gambia's Minister of Youth and Sports, Bakari Waibaji, explains some of the challenges faced by West Africa in anti-doping efforts.
If you look at the continent, Africa, we have only very few testing centers where one can take samples to test. So when there is a suspected abuse of substance, it takes months sometimes before you even can get the results, because it has to go all the way to South Africa, for instance, for them to do the testing before it comes back. As far as I'm concerned, awareness level and the ability to do a quick test and get the quick results are the two major issues.
To this effect, the Youth and Sports Minister Baji hopes one of the outcomes of the ministerial meeting will be the acquisition of testing equipment for doping.
The outcomes that we look forward is one, apart from bringing up the discussion, we reduce our reliance on, for instance, going all the way to South Africa to test. Can West Africa have a testing center that can be able to take care of the countries in West Africa? That's something that the ministers that are coming will be looking at, and what is expected. Maybe get the ECOWAS, because we're inviting ECOWAS as well. Maybe get ECOWAS to see the relevance and try to look for the funding to have an ECOWAS testing center for the West African countries.
The Gambia is to host the regional ministerial meeting on anti-doping at a time when the country is witnessing a surge in drug abuse among young people. The tiny West African country hopes to use the platform to advocate for drug-free sports and also create awareness among young people on the general dangers of drugs and banned substances. For Newslink and West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
And to other news, at least 21,700 migrants were intercepted in the Mediterranean Sea while attempting to reach Europe last year. In a statement on Tuesday, the International Organization for Migration, IOM, said the migrants, comprising 1,500 women and 700 children, were intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard. IOM reported that the vast majority of them ended up in prison. The figure exceeds the annual figure of 2023, which was 17,000 will be illegal migrants intercepted, but remains lower than the 2022 figure of 24,600 people intercepted. It is however worth noting that an estimated 2,200 people died and another 1,700 are feared missing in 2024. According to the UN Migration Agency, those attempting to cross the Mediterranean embark on a perilous journey using makeshift wooden or metal boats unsuitable for such sea journeys. Since 2017, the year of the signing of an agreement between Tripoli and Rome supported by Brussels, the EU has entrusted the Libyan authorities with the responsibility of coordinating rescue efforts at the coasts.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Well, for today's press review, WADR's Sankule Janko Banjul is standing by with major headlines from the national dailies.
Let's begin today's press review with the Standard newspaper. And the lead story on the Standard newspaper reads, New political movement formed. And the political movement, according to the Standard newspaper, is called NAFA. Nigerian lawyer says plans to prosecute Jammeh, serious warning to sitting presidents, according to this other report. Of course, there are processes with regards to the Gambia government's intentions to prosecute former President Yahya Jammeh as per the recommendations of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission's TRRC. GPA intensifies stakeholder meeting over port expansion project. GPA is the Gambia Ports Authority. Let's take a look at the final story on the Standard newspaper for today, and it reads, Senegal rebuke Macron's remarks on military agreements. Let's move on to the Point newspaper for today, and the lead story on the Point newspaper reads, lack of vehicles at prisons hinders court proceedings. Judiciary grapples with criminal justice system. Fishing Ministry hands over 20 fishing canoes to communities in Gambia. This other story reads, driver who allegedly killed 3 at Kafuta pleads not guilty. New infrastructure seeks to transform Banjul Port into international hub, according to MD, that is Managing Director Jobate. And this other one reads, Turkey's ambassador to hand $4 million worth APCs to Gambian military. Let's take a look at the final newspaper for today, and that is the Fourier newspaper. And the lead story on the Fourier newspaper reads, Gambia's major hospitals in crisis amid limited supply of essential medicines. Experts present report on Gambia's caste descent-based discrimination at UN. This other story reads, Education Ministry to deliver textbooks to all lower upper basic schools. And the final story for today reads, NAO, that is National Audit Office, says health facilities challenged with late disbursement of funds. I'm afraid these are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Sankule Janko.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest is Dr. Amakwe Kumasi, a Ghanaian political analyst who joins us from Accra on the National Reset Program announced by Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama. President Mahama, during his inauguration, reiterated his desire to get Ghana back on track economically while improving other sectors such as health, education, social security, and agriculture, among others. Ending corruption is also at the top of his agenda. However, the definition, context, and application of the word reset in President Mahama's administration is very well debated. Will it mean undoing policies and reforms of the last 8 years? Dr. Kumasi weighs in on this.
Those of us who are here in Ghana followed his campaign speeches and promises in them. So the idea of resetting Ghana, some of us wade into the discussions. And I remember interpreting it as restructuring Ghana so that Ghana could work as a country. Restructuring Ghana. My understanding of President Mahama's reset is first and foremost to fight political corruption and to strengthen the institutions of state so that work, that he will allow the laws of the land to also become the guiding principle over everybody's actions and inactions, irrespective of whether you work in his government or not. So generally speaking, it is restructure Ghana's institutions to make them work.
Now, should we go with reset? Does it mean undoing some of the reforms or policies implemented by the immediate past government of President Akufo-Addo, at least in the last 8 years?
This issue of the need to continue with policies that are good, that are desirable, has also come to the fore in Ghanaian politics. And so during the campaign, it became one of the issues that came up. For example, President Mahama was accused that he will not continue with the free SHS policy openly. The NPP used it in their political campaign. President Mahama was forced to openly declare that the policy has come to stay, he will not scrap it. But that aside, Ghanaians have also frowned upon this whole practice or the habit of politicians when they come into office of not continuing with policies that the previous government had started, which they think were good, particular projects that were ongoing, which become abandoned. And so this issue, I think Ghana has crossed it. So the expression reset can never be interpreted to mean undoing what the previous government had done, which appeared to be good and positive. Generally, several sectors of the system are not working. The last government consciously politicized several of them. For example, the judiciary. The Constitution does not have an upper limit of people that should be appointed to the Supreme Court. So obviously that area will be reset. Over the years, both political parties have not been properly recruiting people into the army and into the police. They simply send their supporters in there. So many of them are not properly individuals who should be there. They don't go through proper training. That area will see a resetting. You see, and also the ministries, the people who implement, the policies. It has got to do with the issue of, fighting corruption.
What will it cost the president, the presidency, and the Ghanaian society for this restructuring to really take place or happen? Let's look at the consequences, but of course, the very desired result, which would be the benefits.
Generally speaking, given the approach he's taking, if anything at all, I see minimal cost that might come in terms of time and then basic resources, financial resources that will go in. But I anticipate benefits. Benefits in the sense that, one, with the economy, he's spoken about such a stakeholder consultation. Education, he's spoken about that. They are all strategic positions he has taken. He wants to move along with the whole society so that the economic models that will come out of those consultations, broad consultations, will be owned by society generally. Of course, the implementation will have to be supervised exclusively by the president. If anything at all, it's implementation where he will be held accountable. So, as for cost, there will definitely be cost, but I don't think it will be so high a cost. If he goes about the implementation properly, he will have societal support, to implement them to achieve the desired outcome. So all things being equal, you expect that he will succeed in the education sector. You expect that he will succeed with the economic sector, given the fact that he has got only 4 years.
Dr. Michael Kumasi is a Ghanaian political analyst. Well, in the world of sports, Tuesday marked an important step forward for women's football in Africa with the kickoff of the inaugural Under-17 Girls Integrated Football Tournament known as GIFT in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The pilot edition of the vital new tournament, which was introduced to diversify the football offering on the continent and promote the emergence of new talent, is already living up to its billing. As the teams took to the pitch at the Azam Complex Stadium for the traditional warm session ahead of the opening match, few could have expected the spectacle to come. The day began with a vibrant opening ceremony where young girls aged 7 to 12 delighted the audience with dances to rhythms from various regions of the African continent. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek, Maojo Juf, and Umu Daniogo for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a gender program, 50-50 with Nadiri Tete, to be followed at 1 p.m. by the second edition of our comprehensive news package in French, Info Chef with Alpha Boubacar. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop